Thank you so much for having me in your office today. I'm so excited to be here, despite how cold it is outside.
Well, thank you for having me.
One of the reasons why I wanted to come in and interview you is you have had a spectacular career, full of ups and downs, I imagine, but you started off as a staff writer for practical photography, and you've led some of the world's largest and leading event and media brands. And the news, obviously, your deal closed, so $1.6 billion acquisition by Informa, which is an incredible multiple. So can you share, how did this all happen? How did you go from a writer with these huge dreams, literary dreams, to now being one of the leaders in how global communities connect?
It's the story of media, I suppose you could say, in a way, because I've always been a creative person. I went to art college. I didn't go to university. Photography, writing, that kind of area, and I became an editor of a consumer magazine in the 90s when people bought consumer magazines, and they bought them in their millions. So it was a very good business to be in. And when the world changed, I could see that consumer magazines, consumer media in general, was going to have a really, really hard time. And there was a period that I describe really as the end of the Roman Empire. There was a period in the sort of early 2000s to mid 2000s when most publishers were not taking seriously the threat that was coming their way. And I could kind of see it coming my way. So I thought, well, look, what I'm good at is curating content, bringing people together, trying to create something that somebody's prepared to pay me for. What else could I do? Because I was worried about the future of consumer magazines and consumer media generally. And it occurred to me two things. Firstly, that B2B was more sustainable for various reasons. And then events, I felt, were very sustainable for lots of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. And so I moved into events. I was lucky to move into events. And meanwhile, obviously, the consumer magazine world has really, really changed and got much smaller. So that's how I kind of made that decision and that move into events.
It's interesting when you talk about the consumer side. I remember my first marriage, the wedding magazines. It just, when you talked about photography, like the beautiful photos, and you just piled them on, and you just don't see that anymore. So I mean, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
So the Informa acquisition, I was reading about it in more detail before coming in here, and it looks like they've created a new division called Informa Festivals. So one is, can you explain that structure to us a little bit more? And two, what excites you the most about the synergies between what you've built and now that is part of Informa?
Yeah, and we should go back to the deal itself, because I think the deal itself tells a really interesting story. But if we talk about the creation of Informa Festivals, the idea there is that there are different types of events. There are the more transactional events, then there are kind of content-led events, and then there are what we're describing as experience-led events. And the idea is that when you've got something like Cannes Lions or Money 2020, it steps up a level in terms of the commitment that people have, the experience that people have, what their expectations are of the event itself, and there are a number of different criteria. And so what we did was we looked across the Informa portfolio and saw similar events that were right at the heart of their industry, that had an element of celebration. So the events that are coming in from Informa, there's Black Hat, which is a cybersecurity event in Las Vegas and elsewhere, absolutely at the heart of its industry, launched by an industry expert, which is another really interesting area of similarity, and a kind of feeling of almost like we're in the club together. There's a real feeling that we're in this club together, and it's not a transactional thing. So it's Black Hat, GDC, which is the Gamers Developers Conference in San Francisco, which again has many characteristics of Cannes Lions and Money 2020. For instance, has an awards like Cannes Lions does. When people leave that event they feel proud and excited and inspired to be in their industry. And then the final one is the tech group, the tech festivals across London, Africa, and Singapore. So I think what they've got in common is this sense of the willingness to be happy about being in our industry. We are trying to build relationships, we're trying to consume content. It's not a transactional event. And what we want people to do is when they leave an Informa Festival is genuinely be inspired and be delighted that they've chosen their particular industry. Now, I don't think you can say that for every event in the world, certainly not every B2B event in the world. So if I had to capture the difference of the Informa Festivals brands, it would be that.
It's so interesting. I just to hear you describe it. So it's, this sense of community. It's I have to, if I'm part of this industry and this community, I have to be at that event. Like it's a must go to, and the immersive experience that they have on site. And it's interesting. I was hosting an event, and I didn't connect the dots, but it was in June. I was doing a half-day event in New York for media executives. Little did I know, your event was going on, and everybody was going.
Right.
And it was hosting events within events. Just the energy around it was spectacular.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Cannes Lions is probably the one to aspire to. Mm-hmm. It's very, very special for lots of reasons, but that's kind of the direction that we're trying to build the business in.
Yeah, for sure. So I am going to back up, and I should have asked this question first. So the thing that I was most astounded by was this year, 2024, and everything that transpired. You had the sale of Flywheel, correct,
yeah.
to Omnicom.
Mm-hmm.
Right, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. Omnicom.
Omnicom, and then you were named CEO of Essential PLC, and then all of a sudden, the next thing we know, we get the announcement of the Informa deal, which actually closed very quickly.
Yeah.
What led up to all of this?
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting story. So Essential was really a collection of different types of businesses. And post-COVID, the market lost patience, I suppose you could say, with the different speeds that the business was going. So we had a digital commerce business. That's the one we sold to Omnicom. That was young, in parts loss-making, growing very fast, digital technology. Versus we had events and we had other media platforms as well. So there was a sort of schizophrenic nature to it. So the solution was we're going to sell off some of the digital assets, like the one we sold to Omnicom. We also sold a digital forecasting business called WGSN. We sold that to Apax Partners, private equity. And that left us as a much more simple events-led business. We were two platforms, the Lions platform, Cannes Lions, and the Money 2020 mm-hmm. platform. So that's how it became, and then I became the CEO of that. I think in terms of the deal, what's really interesting is we were trading as an events company. Now, back in October, we were trading at £350 million value in October 2023, £350 million value. By July, we were being acquired for 1.2 billion pounds. So that's quite a delta.
Yeah.
So when you look at that delta, you think to yourself, well, that must mean Informa paid way too much for the business. But that's not true at all. What it tells the story of is much more about public markets. Because what Informa have paid for the business is basically what it's worth. We believed passionately that this business was worth that kind of number. And Informa recognized that. The problem is that the public markets, especially in the UK, do not recognize the value of many, many businesses. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a little bit different in the US, and certainly the big players in the US, that's where all the money's going, right? But when you're talking about mid-market, when you're talking about UK, and forgive me for the American audience, but the problem wasn't the multiple that Informa paid or the premium it paid on our share price. The problem was the public markets did not recognize the value. The reason that's a problem is because executives like myself will be questioning the value of being on the public markets in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So why are you on there in the first place? It's to raise capital, it's to build value. But if investors are not understanding the nature of what we do, then what's the point of being on the public markets? Essential was yet another very high quality business that came off the public markets. And that in the UK has left, I mean, Hive has gone private, we've now gone to Informa. There is basically, apart from Informa, there's nowhere really to go if you're an investor that believes in events. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, that's the story of this whole acquisition. And it's a really important one because when you are running an events business, you know, you've got choices. You know, do you go private? Do you go public? Where's the value? And I think the essential story is an indictment, really, of the public markets.
No, that is such an interesting one. We talked about it before, but I truly didn't understand actually how almost harmful it could be to be on the public market and hamper your ability to actually achieve growth because of that lack of understanding. And when I look at now what Informa has with this rich fabric of all different types of events to meet different needs, like they have got expansive coverage now. So for them, this is wildly valuable. Yeah. I mean, just hearing you talk about that festival construct is what every event organizer wants to achieve.
Yes.
They really do. They want to be able to have a relationship with an audience that keeps coming back over and over again, and now they have that solution through this. So thank you for sharing that. So I think we uncovered that we probably met a few years ago, or 2015, so maybe 10 years ago, or 2016.
Time goes.
So outside of the obvious Informa acquisition, what were the most exciting moments for you in this journey?
I think what's been very exciting is to build Cannes Lions from, I mean, we acquired Cannes Lions for $53 million.
Which is amazing, actually, thinking about it now, what it's worth.
Yeah, and now I don't know what proportion of the 1.6 billion you would apportion to Cannes Lions, but it's going to be more than 50% of that, so you can pick a number. So I think what's been the most exciting thing has been building Cannes Lions into what it is now. And I was talking to some friends the other day, and they were being very kind. They were complimenting me on the journey, and in their view, part of that was because I come from a B2C background. I come from a kind of creative B2C background. So when we're creating the experience and the content, for instance, at Cannes Lions, and the innovations at Cannes Lions, their view was that it helped that I had a slightly more consumer-led lens, which is, I think, a really interesting observation. But to be part of something that has, I mean, for those who've been to Cannes Lions, I think it's a very, very exciting event. It's not quite like anything else, and that's been very, very rewarding, as you can imagine. It's not been without its challenges, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And we can go through those, but it's been very rewarding to see that build and become an absolute network effect must attend event.
So that point you just made is also another, to me, huge value prop, because we were just talking about this before we started, which is this convergence of B2B and B2C. And from the B2B side, what B2B players need to incorporate, and I don't care if it's Welding Week today or Expo, is this next generation of consumers, buyers, sellers, are expecting much more of a B2C experience because of the way just they're surrounded by immersive technology as part of their everyday consumption. So that's a very interesting perspective, and having that is really, you don't find too many B2C folks hopping over to B2B in the US.
No, but let me give you a data point there as well, because of course at Cannes Lions we have the awards, the Cannes Lions Awards. They're a big deal in the creative world, right? And recently we launched a category for B2B marketing. Never had a category for B2B marketing before, but we launched it. It's been going 70 years, and we never felt that the creativity within B2B marketing was sufficient to justify an award at Cannes. So we launched this B2B event, this B2B award, and what it's done is it's kind of opened this amazing box of creativity within B2B. And if you look at the data from last year, right across our festival, not only within the B2B category, but right across the festival, the number of B2B winners of Lions, which is the pinnacle of creativity, is literally going like that. And I think that is just a really great data point for what you're saying, which is that actually B2B marketers have woken up and they've realized I'm actually communicating with a human being, just like I would be on B2C. And it is changing, and it continues to change really dramatically.
Who won the first award?
Well, the one of the big winners last year was Edelman, the PR company. They won a really special award, which was our Titanium Award. And that was about just the shipping world slightly reducing their speed around the world and the impact that has on emissions. And it was signed up by all these different shipping organizations, and it really made a huge difference. But that was a B2B idea. But there were many across the festival. Well,
that's great. I'm gonna have to look those up, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. So this is more of an operational question in that, with Cannes Lion, a 70-year-old brand, when you acquired it, it was 100% in-person revenues. And you were able to shift that with your understanding of where the world was going from 100% in person to, is it 50% on person?
It's about 57% non-event revenues now.
Yeah, and so how did that materialize? What were the strategies you used?
I think it's a really fundamental question that every event organizer has, because it seems to me every event organizer wants to be 365, have revenues across the year, diversify their revenues, de-risk themselves, right? And I think there are many examples where event organizers should just accept the fact that they're event organizers. Not everybody has the right, because over the years, everybody considers themselves to have the right to effectively be a media owner, let's say, or a content creator, or whatever it might be. Shops and banks and all sorts of people consider themselves capable of doing that, and it's not as easy as it seems. And event organizers need to think really hard before they decide that they've got the right to do anything 365 outside of their event, because it's quite difficult and it's very distracting. So sometimes when I do presentations about this, I actually recommend to really do a lot of soul searching. There's a funny phrase in England, I don't know if you have it in America, but if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it is a duck, right? Sometimes you look like an event organizer, you quack like an event organizer, that's what you are. So I think that's the first really big question. Have we got the right to actually play anywhere else apart from our event? The reason Cannes Lions has managed to do it is because we have unique IP. It's because we have the awards that generates IP from which we can then build out other services, right? So the awards, just for those who don't know, are a benchmark of creativity for businesses globally. So what businesses do is they look at the winners of Cannes Lions and they say, that is the kind of work we need to create in order to have impact on our marketing, on our business outcomes. And it's a very valuable piece of IP, right? So what that allows us to do in the case of Cannes Lions is two things. Firstly, we can create a digital database of that, and we can add value on top of it. analysis and all sorts of other different kind of tools and metrics to that data, and we can repackage it and sell it. And the other thing we can do is we can create advisory and consultancy services, which we do. So what we can say to organizations, and we work with many, many global organizations, they come to us and they say, how do we get better at creative marketing? How do we create real impact? And how do we prove the value of that, of what we do every day? And we can, from our IP and our data, create programs, some of them multi-million dollar, multi-year programs with global clients to help them become more creative. Part of it is a mindset. So when people say, what do you do? What does Cannes Lions do? The obvious answer is, well, we run an event in Cannes in the south of France. But we're really clear about what we actually do. Well, that is not what we do. What we actually do is we solve a problem for marketing professionals globally. The problem for marketing professionals globally is they sit in a boardroom and they're facing a CEO and a CFO and other stakeholders who firstly don't really understand what they do for a living, and secondly are extremely skeptical about the value of marketing. And therefore, when CMOs are arguing for investment, capital investment in marketing, they're up against it. They're always the first to have their budgets cut. They're always the ones that have to prove their outcomes. So what we do is we try to give them the data, the information that they need to put forward an argument for capital allocation in marketing. And it's extremely difficult. To give you one example, I'll shut up then, but one example, a lot of marketing is multi-year. It takes years to build a brand, but you can't capitalize marketing spend. It's all in year one. So the CFO and the CEO are saying, you're spending $50 million. Where's my payback? Well, the payback's not coming for 3 or 4 years. So there are many, many elements to it. So what do? We don't run an event in Cannes. We help marketers with this challenge that they've got.
That's brilliant. I'm like, my brain is like, oh, let's see. Not as glamorous as Cannes Lion, but I had 2 points. One is I think it's much easier for companies that start with media to launch events because they have already that 365 engagement and that trust. And but the second point is the way you phrased solving this problem. It's so fundamental and critical to the value you bring to the table. So, and being able to do that through high credibility awards, which there are a lot of organizations out there that have what I call pay for play awards.
Yeah.
Is huge, because that icon that they can put on their door, it says something huge.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's partly because of the industry. So shall I just talk about awards for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's obviously another area where many event organizers wish to go on awards.
Yep.
There's a hierarchy of awards, and the hierarchy is based not on the awards or the organization that puts them on, actually, but on the industry they serve. And that hierarchy at the very top is the most valuable awards are those that are pointing at industries who create something, market that thing, stop that thing, then create something else brand new, need to market it, then stop, then do something else, right? Give you an example, filmmaking. Another example, the theatre. So if you take filmmaking, what do film studios do? They make a film, they market that film, then they make another film. It's called job production. At the bottom of the pyramid, you've got what you call flow production. So that's just, it's automated, it's high volume, it's usually, it's a volume game as opposed to a quality game. So at the top of the pyramid, you've got the Oscars, because the Oscars are the most valuable award because film studios use it to sell individual products. This film will get more people to go to the cinema if it wins an Oscar. That's why it's valuable. It's not the glamour. That's why the Tony Awards are valuable. That's why all of this job production, we make one thing, we make another thing. But at the bottom, you've got, say, the oil industry as an example. So the oil industry is a flow production industry. You know, it's very automated. It's doing the same thing over and over again. It's a volume game. There are awards for the oil industry, but the value is very low because it's not really going to drive the business.
Yeah.
Now, in between an Oscar and the oil awards, there are a number of different layers. And Cannes Lions, as an example, is very high up there. The reason it's high up there is because if you're a creative person in an advertising agency, let's say, there is very little way that you can prove that you're good at your job without external validation. So if you're a banker or a lawyer, if you're a lawyer, you can say, I'm really good at my job and here's the proof. I've won the last 10 cases that I took. It's fact. But if you're a creative person, it's too subjective. So you need external validation, which is why the advertising agencies value Cannes Lions so highly. So I think for event organizers, when they're looking at, shall we launch an award, you've got to look where, let's be honest with ourselves, where is the industry we serve on that pyramid? Because if we're at the bottom, the best we can do is some pay-for-play thing and a dinner, and you know it's fine, but it's not going to be the Oscars.
Yeah.
And so in between, you've got every different type of industry.
So I couldn't agree with you more. The brand that I ran was manufacturing executive communications, and we had an awards program, and it was very meaningful because that industry was in massive transition with the adoption and of technology. And the data game was starting way back then. So these unsung heroes, as we would call them, the VP of manufacturing, the SVP of supply chain, the poor CIO, great titles in a way, but they had to prove, to management that they were doing these, best practices and doing these gains. And we would also get in all this huge amounts of data from these nominations. And I think we were by the time we sold, we were in our 12th year, people were getting promotions and being hired by other companies because they won one of our awards.
Yeah,
so not quite the Oscars, but
it's a perfect example. Yeah. Absolutely perfect example.
So let's move into data, which data's the new oil, or it's been there, sitting there. It's been, when you are dealing with a multi-sided business model with audience or buy side and sell side and content consumption, you are generating data about behaviors and trends and preferences 365, 247. And AI is becoming, the big buzzword du jour, although again, I said it's been there and you can't have AI without data. And I think you have an interesting point of view that is shared, but I'd love to dive into it, which is AI and data are going to disrupt or have started to disrupt industries like media and potentially events. And there's opportunity and threat. What's your opinion about the opportunity and threat, and where do you see this shaking out?
Well, my view on the opportunity is a little bit societal and quite high level, but I think that in the future, in the very near future, all of us will have the opportunity to make a choice 100 times a day. Do I want to interact with a human, or do I want to interact with AI? And a lot of the time we're going to choose AI because it's more reliable, it never gets grumpy, it knows everything you can possibly imagine, and it's a loyal, faithful, tireless friend. I genuinely think people are going to spend a lot of time interacting with AI. The good news for event organizers is that the overwhelming human desire and need to be together as humans is not going to go away anytime soon. So I think what that's going to do is it's going to mean that human connection actually becomes more valuable, not less valuable. And we certainly saw a little rerun of that, or a little pre-run of that with COVID. If you look at all the event organizers in the world, the bounce back from COVID has been incredible. And a big part of that bounce back, I believe, is this realization of how much people missed being together. So there's this human fundamental psychology that I think will be exacerbated by AI, because we are going to spend a lot of time interacting with AI. That's just a simple fact. It will become, for instance, it'll become the way you manage your calendar, the way you manage your meetings, the way you know, all of that stuff. So that's on the big side. So I'm very bullish on events, really, really bullish on events. I've always said that's why I went to events in the first place, because I just thought digital cannot disrupt human beings' need to be in a tribe. I'm sorry, it just can't do it.
Agree.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, it cannot ever do that. And we found that in COVID. You know, we tried to run digital events in COVID. It's like, nobody wants to do that.
No.
They want to be face to face. So that's that. On the disruption side, I think we're already seeing it hugely, and we're seeing it a lot with the data that we repurpose and resell and try to, because our customers have, you know, they can get hands on that data as well, and they can do that as well. So I think there's a big threat to a lot of media organizations around AI, because the data is out there. I mean, we're already hearing it from the B2C people, New York Times, all of that lot. What is populating these LLMs? And I think for all of us on that kind of media data side of things, I think AI is potentially a really big threat as well.
No, I agree. And it feels, you mentioned the 2000 era, which I remember very well. This feels like 100 times more disruptive. And I think what it means for media companies is that they have to figure out the depth to which they drill down into the industries they serve, in terms of not just the content that's created, it's tools to use that content to do their jobs better, that AI can't replicate. Like, they get the moat. So, and I think we have a couple more questions, but this one more is, I would say, more philosophical. And being a CEO in this industry, which has been very much battered and beaten up, whether it's Google and social media coming in and taking over traffic, or starting to write the rules about advertising platforms and tech, to COVID, to cyclical in nature. Budgets are very, very tenuous when the economy is feeling shaky. It's exhilarating and it's exhausting, right? And we all have our battle scars, and I think as an industry, we're survivors, and we have a tremendous amount of resilience and grit. And I think COVID showed that, actually. I mean, you would think when everything shut down, you're like, they've got nothing.
This is the end.
Yeah.
It felt like that.
Right? But it didn't. In your career, what key inflection points shaped your leadership lens and philosophy, and what gave you the most grit?
I think on Cannes Lions has seemed to be a really big success, but we've had a lot of ups and downs. The global financial crisis smashed us to pieces. Our revenues went down 60%. A few years later, one of our biggest customers, the CEO changed at one of the big agency groups, and they pulled out of Cannes. And there was a real tailwind behind them of other complaints about what we do, and that felt existential as well. I thought I'd built resilience until COVID came along, because I honestly thought, how could it be worse than the global financial crisis, or one of my biggest customers actually pulling out of my entire event? I've seen it all. And then COVID came, and I thought, this is existential. So what I think, again, just to go back to our point before, all it shows is the resilience of really strong, these strong communities, that the need to come together, this tribal instinct. You know, obviously humans are tribal, that's got a negative connotation, causes wars, but it's got a hugely positive one as well, which is people want to be part of something. They need to be part of something. And that desire has always helped us to bounce back. I think going forward though, what we see as to getting a bit more granular on the event side, and I'm sure many of the people watching will understand this, there are still lots and lots of challenges. So with big events, there is always a huge fringe activity that are not, there's lots of people coming around your event, they're not paying you a dime, they're having meetings outside. That's a big thing, and you have to find ways around that. And then the other thing we're seeing is, on some of our events, the expo floor is being, partly because of the costs, is being replaced by a need for different types of activations. So people want meeting rooms, they want other kinds of things. So you've got to be alive to that creative change and the morphing, because if you stand still for like one cycle, you're going to be way behind the pace. But I think that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah, no, and that point, I just was at an event that had some brand marketers talking about what they need events to, how they need them to transform, and that point you just made right there is, they want to move away from this transactional, very cold booth experience to more of the, like a meeting, and like I want a living room there.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. That's it. It's a huge thing. I think it's happening in a lot of events.
Yeah.
So you've got to find a way to do that. And then on the fringe side, you've got to find a way to get people involved, get them in, be part of this, don't be on the outside of it. So all of those are challenges.
Well, I think my last question is going to be, you're now part of Informa. You've done all of this amazing work and created amazing solutions for your customers. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
I think I enjoy creating things. That's what I've always enjoyed. I enjoy building things, giving people opportunities, making opportunities for customers. And I think on the big playing field that Informa is, and it is huge, I mean, it's absolutely breathtakingly big and powerful and interesting. And I think that opens up so many opportunities. So I'm excited for that. Yeah,
and I think on the Informa side, the acquisitions they've been making in the U.S., Tech Target, Industry Dive, and that whole play is hopefully will have a scalability factor in terms of how data is going to fuel the events and other things they're doing. Like that example I shared with you. So, thank you so much. This was awesome.